In today's episode, we are joined by Dr. Carlos Perez Delgado, who is a leading expert in post-quantum security, particularly blockchains, has a lot of experience in quantum computing, ranging from software engineering to the infrastructure side. So we have a lot to discuss on that. Carlos just brings decades of experience and insight. So you're really going to want to hear what he has to say on the space and where the direction of where it's potentially heading, and just a lot of exciting stuff to cover in this wide ranging conversation with Dr. Carlos Perez Delgado. Let's dive in. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the QRL Show, the place where you come for the crypto and stay for the quantum. On today's episode, my co-host Michael Strike and I from the QRL core team are thrilled to be joined by Dr. Carlos Perez Delgado for his second appearance on the QRL Show. His first was with his co-authors of the paper titled Downtime Required for Bitcoin Quantum Safety, which we had Carlos and his co-authors on to discuss that, which we might touch on briefly here. And that work, obviously, within even the last 3 to 6 months alone, it's definitely becoming more of a commonplace to people, not just in blockchain, but overall with forward-looking people in the industry. Carlos is he's from the University of Kent School of Computing in Canterbury, England. Kent School of Computing is really well known, world-class in research, and really high-end in terms of teaching. Carlos, you're a university lecturer, researcher, leading expert in post-quantum security, and you spend a lot of time in quantum software engineering, tied together with infrastructure. So I'm sure we'll get into a lot of questions on that. And one of the exciting parts I want to touch on as well is University of Kent is opening up a quantum applications research center, which you're the deputy director of. So I will pause at my intro there, and Carlos, let you fill in a few holes. Just overall, we're excited for myself and Michael to have a conversation with you and to have our audience learn from you.
Yeah, welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Ryan, for that beautiful intro. Thank you, Michael, and both of you for the kind invitation to chat with you. So we're really excited at the University of Kent. We're just announcing just now the opening of the Quantum Applications Research Center at Kent. We call it Quark Kent for short. We feel very clever with that name. And the idea of the Quark is to focus particularly on current day applications and short-term, near future, what we call near future applications of quantum technologies. It's less of a pie in the sky, blue skies, far future research, which most of quantum computing, quantum information research has been. But rather, we're trying to focus on with the technology that we see it as it is now, and in the next 5 to 10 years, what can we do? And one of those things, which is, I guess, what we're going to be talking about here today, is blockchains, cryptocurrencies. Obviously, quantum technologies has a outsized impact on blockchains and cryptocurrencies. That's one thing that we discussed in our last meeting together. But there are plenty of other areas where quantum technologies, this new growing, fast growing area, has the potential to have a outsized impact. So we're really excited to be pursuing new research avenues there.
It feels like kind of a lot's changed since we talked last.
Yes. Google announcements and other researchers have
major firms, merger organizations.
Yeah, every year is like several years within one. Even the months are starting to condense together. No, that's really exciting on the new center at the University of Kent. I like how you mentioned too, in terms of so many people, whether it's in academia or in some business sector, or even just people in general globally. A lot of people hear the word quantum computing and they think of this futuristic world that might be 20, 30 years out. And so when you mention short term, it's I think within some of the questions we have today, it'll be nice to get into the specifics on, hey, this technology, we're obviously seeing this momentum and progress taking place, but there's a lot of parts that are already in motion now. So I'm looking forward to expanding on that. One question I'd like to kind of open up with, kind of tied to your intro and origin story that we have is, can you fill in any other holes? Give the viewer. I know some people were on our last episode that was with yourself and co-authors, but we just have you today, which is really exciting to be able to expand on some of these. Can you give us a little bit of high level on your journey? Take us back a trip in memory lane a little bit to your overall journey into quantum, from your PhD work at Waterloo to all the way to present day at the University of Kent, and maybe within that, what drew you to that intersection of quantum, physics, information, cybersecurity, and fill in those holes. I think that would be a great starting place, and then we'll move along the path in your journey.
Sure. Like some heroes' journeys, mine is a tale of hubris. I went into quantum computing because I was finished my undergraduate, and I pretty much just wanted the hardest, most brutal, difficult version of computer science that I could sign up for. So I decided to go do a PhD in quantum computing. At the time, it seemed like the furthest frontier of computer science.
What year was that?
And just to interject quick, Carlos, give us that rough time frame for the idea, because I think people envisioning this, people still think quantum computing is, wow, that's very forward facing, but what year roughly, what time frame was
so
this?
This was early 2000s.
Yes. Okay. Perfect. So viewers thinking about this is think on if you listen to stuff today, talks on Scott Aronson or others on the space. This is where so I just wanted to give users context there. Continue, Carlos.
Yeah, so I joined the University of Waterloo in the early 2000s. At the time, Scott Aronson was a postdoc at the University of Waterloo. So there was a pretty strong research group there already, and it was growing at some would say exponential rate. I remember there was a conference at Waterloo, and Daniel Gottesman, who is well known in quantum computing for having had a very strong hand, co-creator of quantum error correction, without which you can't really do quantum computing at all. He gave a funny dinner lecture at a conference at Waterloo, where he suggested that by the year, I think it was 2037, he estimated that everybody in the world would be working on quantum computing at the University of Waterloo, just based on
what year did he make
the growth.
What year did he say that?
This was, if I recall correctly, this was 2006.
That's, I mean, in 2006, that would have been, even by today's standards, an interestingly close approximation, right?
Yeah.
In one way or another, right? Interesting, yeah.
It was an interesting place to be at. It still is. It's one of the epicenters of quantum computing, quantum information technologies. I shouldn't say most, but an outsized portion of the community has been through Waterloo in some shape or form, even if it's just visiting.
It's a powerhouse in terms of, and like you said, everyone's pretty well connected in that world of some degree of separation or connectedness.
Yeah, no, there's a saying in the community: the world is large, but the community is small. And at least into the 2010s, we were still saying that. I don't know if people still say that now, but yes, it wouldn't be uncommon, and it hasn't been uncommon for, say, people that I met in Ottawa to run into them in Singapore. Because again, the world is large, but the community is small, and there's these epicenters of where you congregate. So speaking of that, after I finished my PhD at the University of Waterloo, I moved to the UK, where I am now. I worked for a short while at the University of Sheffield, and from there I moved to Singapore, where I joined the Center for Quantum Technology, CQT, at the University of Singapore, which is another one of the big quantum technologies epicenters. In fact, some people say that there's some sort of quantum tunneling between Waterloo and Singapore. because somehow mysteriously people at Waterloo just will reappear magically in Singapore and vice versa, and that's happening constantly. So there seems to be some quantum entanglement
Some non-locality.
there. And yeah, after Singapore, which was a great gig, I really enjoyed it. I learned a lot from some very smart people. It's absolutely crazy how many really good researchers in quantum computing there are at the CQT, Center for Quantum Technology in Singapore. To give you an idea, like your standard university anywhere in the world, in the UK, Canada, the US, other than Waterloo, you're talking about maybe two, three, maybe four experts on quantum computing if you're
Yeah.
lucky. Here, there's really two of us that are doing quantum technologies at the University of. I mean, full time. There are people that who dabble. They work in other
Yeah, but
areas,
their specialty. Yeah.
but where their specialty is quantum technologies, quantum computing, you might be thinking maybe there's two, three people per university. At CQT, you had a whole building, 6 floors of people just doing different aspects. You had one floor for the mathematicians, one floor for the quantum physicists, one floor for the quantum chemists, and there was huge interactions and very very lively, very very active, constant talks, constant interactions. It's a very good place to live and breathe and learn about quantum technologies. So that's where, for lack of a better word, I forged myself in the fires of quantum technologies. But eventually, I had to leave and move on into regular academia. So I took a job here at the University of Kent, where now I'm a senior lecturer and I act as deputy director of the Quark. So I'm more now into normal academic land, where again I am once again just one out of two or three people at my institution where we do quantum technologies. But it's really exciting. We developed the quantum technologies module here in collaboration with my colleagues at Quark. So we have our undergraduates and our graduate students now have access to a uh, cutting edge course on quantum technologies where we teach them both quantum cryptography, quantum computation, what impact that has on other areas of technologies, and people can take a course or two in that specific area as they pursue their undergraduate, either in physics or computer science, or graduate studies in any specialized area within those fields.
Yeah. No, I think I'm excited to jump into some of our questions here, just for the viewers while you're watching this. Even if you type Carlos's name out and take a look at some of your research works on, say, Google Scholar, you'll see kind of a vast array of your work over the years as well. So just as an added reference point, we're going to put a ton of stuff in the show notes as well for those that are watching to kind of jump down their own rabbit holes. But Michael, do you want to maybe kick us off with some of these questions, and I think we'll port back to some of these ideas and get to your work, your students' latest work within that, and just talk on the general direction of where you see the industry going and kind of where we're at today. Does that sound good for you, Carlos and Michael?
Sounds great.
Yeah, let's do that. So let's see. We had a list of questions ahead of time that we prepped. One of them is, what do you see as the most promising quantum computing architecture or infrastructures for long term? So you've got superconducting, trapped ions, photonic systems, neutral atoms, or something else. What do you see as the potential future? Obviously, the industry is trying to kind of gravitate towards this general purpose eventually. Quantum computer, it may not actually get there. It might actually be more like an ASIC. I don't know. Maybe you have some insight on that. Particularly, I find photonic computing very interesting because it almost seems like it's the less understood and less personally less understood and less publicized, which has a degree of secrecy and mystique to it. But what are your thoughts? Trapped ion seems to be very popular with the major manufacturers, and you've got quantum annealing, of course. But what are your thoughts?
So I have to start by giving a disclaimer that I'm probably not the best person to ask because I have friends at IonQ, Google, former colleagues, and I have to be very careful with it where I don't upset.
Maybe we frame it more around from more of a high level parts, components of what you're excited about. Like to say, hey, I like apples. Doesn't mean I don't like oranges. Doesn't mean I don't like pears.
Sure.
But for an
Well, what do you
example,
like most about?
aspects of what?
What do you
Yeah,
like about each
it's
one?
up to you. Yeah.
Okay, so let me
You
tell
don't
you
have to pick
a few
one.
things I'm excited about. So let's start with superconducting qubits. The really cool thing about supercomputing qubits is you can get a lot of qubits now, right? And that's not something any of the other architectures are really giving you. IBM is really scaling up the number of qubits you can get in their superconducting architectures. So I think for NISQ, for near uh, um,
You
um,
should.
intermediate, noisy intermediate stage quantum computing,
Yep.
um, really the one of the big things that you'll be looking at, you have to look at, is superconducting qubits.
You still need the low temperatures, and if I'm not mistaken, you need specific isotopes of helium,
Yes,
even
it's
multiple neutrons of helium. Yeah,
it's not cheap, it's not easy, and one of the big things is we don't have the control that we wish we had. These are alluding to the NISQ acronym. These are noisy qubits. So let me take a step back, actually, and this is what any one person working in quantum. If you ask John Preskill, if you ask Scott Aronson, I think they'd say something very, very similar. Really, there's always been two diverging paths with quantum computing architectures. At the beginning, there was only one, which was very few qubits and very noisy, and that's all we had. Back when I was starting at Waterloo, I was working on nuclear magnetic resonance. My first research project was to write a compiler, well, help write a compiler that would take your quantum programs and turn them into magnetic pulses for a nuclear magnetic resonance based quantum computer. Much of like what Qiskit does today, but much more rudimentary for a very small. To give you an idea, we were talking about a 7-qubit quantum computer. That was a 7, and you couldn't scale that. You couldn't add in more qubits later. That was it. That was the limit of what we could get, and those 7 qubits were very noisy. So noisy, in fact, that you could prove that there was no entanglement. So really, this was just a test bed for building future quantum technologies.
you could
Uh,
prove that it was broken.
yes, and just the
It's
whole
blue
point of
screened.
it
We're
was
making
just we can
progress.
do something. Yeah. So this was the early 2000s. This is where quantum technologies uh, was in the early 2000s, and I think that'll be interesting to know for your viewers because on one hand, we keep saying, quantum computers are always 10 years out. And every 10 years, we say that it's 10 years out. Uh, and it's easy to fall into the trap of thinking that that it's never going to happen. But then you see the trajectory. If you pay attention to the trajectory and see, okay, the NMR quantum computers of early 2000s, 7 qubits, and they were all noisy to what we have now. It's very, very different. But sorry, I'm jumping ahead. Let me go
That's
back.
great.
So at the beginning, we had few noisy qubits, and that's all we could have. And then there were two diverging paths where different experimentalists, back then it was just people in academia. The Googles, the IBMs would come later. But back then you had two diverging paths, and one was we're going to scale the control as best as we can, and we'll deal with the scaling the number of qubits later. So we're going to improve our control. We're going to reduce our noise. We're going to improve our cooling. We're going to make the cleanest qubits we can, and then we'll scale that up.
Yeah, we'll amp it up following that.
Yeah. The opposite view was what D-Wave was one of the first pioneers. Says, you know what? Forget about perfect control. You're not going to get that anytime soon. Let's scale number of qubits. It doesn't matter if we lose control, if we lose fidelity, if the noise increases. Let's just build as many qubits as we can, and then we'll figure out how to cool it down, how to improve our control. This has led to what today nowadays we call NISQ, and NISC is the only real quantum computers that we have today. So in a sense, this second approach has paid off. Our hope is that two approaches reconverge, and we eventually get something that we call universal scalable general purpose quantum computers. These will have clean qubits. They will have fully controllable, fully programmable. You'll have the full shebang, as they say. But that's what's a long time. That's what's still fairly far into the future. Maybe less so. IBM and Google keep putting out press releases where they've improved their control, and they've scaled up the number of qubits, and these keep getting better and better. So coming back to your question, Michael, I think you really want to be looking at superconducting, because it's one of the best examples of this second approach, the NISC approach. The let's scale up qubits and then improve the control. They can scale lots of qubits very, very easily. They're still struggling to get them, as you pointed out. It's difficult to control. It's difficult to cool down to the temperatures that you need. There's crosstalk. Crosstalk means you're trying to apply a gate to a particular qubit, and that causes other qubits in the vicinity to also have a percentage of that gate. So oversimplifying a little bit, but that's generally the idea. Is gates will be applied when you don't want them to. But it's a very promising technology in that sense. Then you mentioned ions. Ions are really, really interesting in that it's harder to get as many qubits as you can. Trapped ions it's harder to scale, but at least theoretically the control is easier to achieve, and we should be able to achieve better control. And once you achieve better control and you can cool them down, and you have very clean qubits, the scaling could be improved. IonQ is doing really nice things with that. Then there's the optical quantum computers. I met Jeremy O'Brien when he was a postdoc a few years ago, and several years ago. And even back then, what he was doing was really impressive. For those you and your audience that don't know, what Jeremy O'Brien did essentially, well, him and the people that he worked with, is take these quantum optics experiments that would take what we call a light table, this enormous table that has to be suspended so that the vibrations of the building don't affect the table, because it'll change the alignment. So you have these isolated tables, you have lasers and mirrors and half mirrors, and you have the experiment that runs across this enormous table across the whole room, and people have to be very careful when they walk into the room to not touch anything. And he reduced that into a chip.
Now with
And
the
it's
table,
what
I'm
they
just trying
call
to for the viewer. Is the table suspended in a certain way so that it's not at the same? Like, let's say I don't know, there's some shake or some construction outside. How can you just expand on that for like 10? Yeah, I'm
no,
just curious.
the table is on the floor. It
Okay,
just the what's it called? The stand has pneumatic. It's a vibration absorbing
got it.
table legs.
because
I'm
otherwise,
not the right person to ask.
No,
because
no, no. But keep going. I'm just
yeah,
you're leading us down that.
very interesting.
Yeah.
So him and other people working with him have created what we call the quantum optics in a chip, reducing what was once enormous into a single chip. And for a while he was here at the University of Bristol, and then he went off and got a lot of seed funding to turn that into him and Terry Rudolph, if I recall correctly, have another company in California working on building these optical based optic chip based quantum computers, and that's really exciting. And one of the reasons why that's exciting that I haven't mentioned yet is they're planning on basing their quantum computers on something that we call measurement based quantum computing, which is a completely different paradigm, not just for quantum computing, but for computation in general. And let me explain that at a very high level. Um, I think most of your viewers, especially the ones that have a background in computer science or did logical circuits, maybe in high school, will have this picture, this image in their head of a logical circuit. You have these wires, they go from left to right, and then you have these gates, and you have an AND gate or a NAND gate, ORs, NOTs. And that's a picture that I think a lot of us can relate to. And normally, when we think of computation, that's how we think of it. You have information flowing from left to right. You have your bits, or in the case of quantum computing, you have your quantum bits, and then we apply logical operators, logical gates. And then at the end of the day, for quantum computers, we measure that final state. And that's the usual, what we call the circuit based model. Uh, in classical computing, it's what you would call your von Neumann architecture. It's you have operations applied to data, and at the end of the day, you extract the final result is what you're looking for. Measurement based quantum computing turns that on its head. And as the name implies, rather than applying gates in order to perform your operations, you apply measurements. What you do, the way it works, is you create a highly entangled state. So you grab a whole bunch of qubits and you entangle them, and you just entangle them. You don't. The entanglement process has nothing to do with your computation. So you create what's called a universal graph state. So it's just a state of many qubits all connected together, all entangled together. But as I said, that you do that before your input, before you even know what your computation is. You prepare that, and once you know what your computation is, you come in, and all you have to do to your quantum bits is apply measurements. And you apply measurements. As you're applying your measurements, your total entanglement is being destroyed. But what's left at the very end is the solution to your computation.
So it's a statistical solution. You may have to repeat this several times in order to get the answer that you want.
No, because the measurements are chosen as to be deterministic.
Okay.
It's right. So let me take a step back. When you perform a quantum measurement, in the most general case, you have a statistical you have some probability distribution of what your answer is going to be. But you can, if you choose your measurement correctly, you can have essentially, you can reduce the probability distribution to something that you will. It's not doesn't necessarily have to be 100%. But what we do is we have something called corrections. So say you apply the first measurement, and you measure a single qubit, and you'll measure it in either in 0 and 1. If you measure a 0, then you say, okay, I'm good, and I continue doing the computation. If I measure a 1, I'm like, okay, I'm not quite good, but all I have to do is that the next measurement, instead of measuring this way, I measure it the other way around. Instead of up being 1 and down being 0, I just flip that around, and now my up is 0 and my down is up.
I love it.
So I just changed the basis of my subsequent measurements as I go along, and that fixes any errors. We call them corrections, and at the very end, I just have to apply a final set of corrections, and I get my output with probability 1. I get the right output that I wanted, and that's a very clever way to perform computation. And to my mind, it's very exciting, very interesting. As a scientist, I love it because there's no classical analog, right? For a quantum circuit, you can say, okay, there's quantum circuits, and the quantum circuit is the quantum analog of a classical circuit. So quantum circuits are to classical circuits what quantum computers are to classical computers, what quantum bits are to classical bits, fine. But when you go to measurement-based quantum computing, what's the classical version of that? There is no classical version. Right? This only works because when you measure a quantum state, you collapse it, you change its state. And so by measuring, what we're doing is we're forcing this amorphous, entangled system to eventually collapse to the solution to our problem.
And anything it's entangled with?
At the end of the day, nothing will be entangled. The idea is you perform, you design your series of measurements. So at the end of the day, the entire entanglement is destroyed, and all you have left is the solution to your answer. If you did it correctly, obviously you could make mistakes, but if you perform the computation correctly, at the end of the day, you will have destroyed a whole bunch of entanglement, but in return, you have the answer to your
Super interesting.
query.
I love it.
Yeah.
And there's lots of advantages. So let's put aside the coolness factor, which to me is the best part. But there's very pragmatic upsides to this. One of them is, as I was saying, I can create my entanglement without having the input to my problem. Right. This is a computational resource that I can just build offline, and then once I have enough quantum entanglement, I can take my input, and the input includes both the computation I want to perform and what the input to that computation is.
But you want to get your input in fast before you lose coherence.
Yes. So
you got to know what it is ahead of time.
Well, yes and no, because there's another thing, and this is where the technology is developing, right? If I can create entanglement faster than I'm losing it, which is to say, my coherent process that adds another qubit to my entangled state, if that is faster than how decoherence is destroying my state, then I can just, and I need that in the first place, right? Because I won't be able to even build the quantum state if I can't build it faster than it's being destroyed.
So you're building it as it's decohering, you're rebuilding it in real time.
Yes, that's generally the idea.
I thought you said this wasn't going to be the cool part.
Let's just go down. We can talk on these.
Okay.
I think there's just a number of areas we want to,
we've got lots
talk on here. I'm going to jump to one. I'm going to, and then maybe circle us back. We have a couple on, infrastructure, another one that kind of transitions to, hey, the research on, tied to like actual blockchain developers. I'll go to this one next. In your view overall, Carlos, how do you think quantum computing infrastructure evolves, say, over the next 5, 10 plus years? And, do you see a world where, it's a lot of like large scale cloud-based quantum systems, hybrid, where it's, classical quantum, have data centers, or maybe fully distributed quantum networks becoming the norm? What's your general take for the infrastructure? Anything to add to that one, Michael?
To add to that, do you also see quantum computers that are sparsely geolocated, connected classically, but running in different labs, but still operating independently, but on the same problem?
Sure. Let me answer that, and I'll even add in a follow up of my own.
Awesome.
I think for the next 5, 10 years, possibly 15, 20 years, in the near to midterm future, what we're absolutely going to be heavily focused on is what people now call cloud-based quantum computing. So the NQCC, the National Quantum Computing Center here in the UK, for example, is providing funding to various universities, including us, to use cloud-based quantum services provided by the likes of IBM, IonQ. This is now their business model. Their business model is they've built these quantum computers, and now they bill universities for us to access these quantum computers on the cloud. And right now it's mostly universities because it's mostly people with PhDs, no lab coats, but still the nerdy people in
the talents
university labs that even know what to do with these devices. I think that's going to change in the next 5 to 10, 15 years. Joseph, who you had in the show, will hopefully have some say in that, where lots of us are working on practical applications of quantum computing that I think a lot of people are going to be interested in doing, but they're not going to be buying a quantum computer for their home or even for their small business. I think in the foreseeable future, if you have quantum computing applications that you wish to implement, you'll be running them on the cloud. Does that mean that we can perform distributed quantum computing on different cloud servers? Absolutely.
Right.
For that, what we'll need is quantum communication. We need quantum communication channels in between quantum computers, because regardless of, let me put it this way: two quantum computers that are isolated, it can only talk classically,
Right.
are limited by the size of the largest quantum computer of whichever of the two, and that limits, that will limit how much entanglement you can create, and the amount of entanglement limits your quantum advantage. There's very important mathematical results that are 20 years plus old, which tell you that the level of quantum advantage that you can get is upper bounded by the amount of entanglement that you're generating. Because whenever you don't have entanglement, you can simulate that classically. And if you have two quantum computers that are isolated and can only communicate classically, then that level of entanglement, total entanglement that you can create, is constrained by the individual sizes of your quantum computers. But now, if you allow them to communicate quantumly, so you have some channel, and it doesn't have to be a complicated channel. It could just be some optic fiber between the two, so you can communicate photons. These two devices don't have to be optical quantum computers. They can be ion based. They can be supercomputing. You just need one way to transfer the quantum information from your photon onto the quantum computer. There are various ways to do that depending on architecture. If you can communicate, if you can create a quantum communication channel between the two quantum computers, then the quantum computers become bigger than the sum of their individual parts, and you have a quantum computer that is limited by the total size of the two quantum computers combined, which is really what you would want if you're interested in distributed quantum computing. This will be what you will be wanting to build. And for that, as I said, you want quantum communication channels. These are easier than you might imagine. There are people here at University of York here in the UK who have been working for years on something that we call quantum repeaters, which is the essential ingredient for any quantum communication channel. Um, and essentially, a quantum repeater is, just like the name implies, just like a classical repeater, a device that sits in between the two devices and allows you to connect devices further apart than you normally would. There's a lot of work also done at various universities here in the UK, in the US as well, on communicating quantum bits over what we call dirty fiber. And dirty fiber, it's has nothing to do with cleanliness. It's fiber that's being used for other purposes. So, for example, the fiber that's already being connected throughout the world for our high-speed internet.
You're getting
So,
Michael excited on the
No,
network.
well, so my background is network
Yeah,
engineering,
he's
so
yeah.
I'm aware of how classical fibers and different wavelengths can transfer, through fiber optic, and then they transfer through classical repeaters because it's fully processed, and decoherence and superposition is not a concept that needs to take place. What's always interested me is how this could be done with a quantum repeater, which to me always, and you know more about this than I do, but this has always been like almost needs to be a quantum computer itself, maybe. But my background is the class. My background is the dirty repeating, as you called it, which I take no offense to. But it is accurate. It is accurate at the quantum scale. Yes.
It's a term. It's a term of endearment, I'm sure. But no, to add to that, you're right. The quantum repeater is essentially a quantum computer.
Okay.
However, it's a 1-qubit quantum computer.
Yep.
Right.
But it's fast. It has to be fast.
It has to be fast, but it doesn't have to be large.
All right. Good.
And it doesn't have to be universal either.
Right.
These come pre-programmed. They have a very limited set of operations they have to perform. It only has to be performed on a very limited number of qubits. I said one, but that might be an oversimplification, because you'll want more physical qubits to have a clean logical qubit due to error correction. But it's, at least in theory, a much easier device to build than
to give the viewer a sense for if they're picturing it. Yeah.
I have so many other questions,
Yeah.
Ryan.
No, I
Move us
I
along.
want to jump to this one because Carlos, you touched a little bit on it of, depending on, the application or specific, even a few minutes back on, hey, what are some of the things in the short term specific to us? Obviously, we're in the blockchain space. I'd love to get your take on, how important to you is, the collaboration between the actual quantum computing research and that side to then on the blockchain side, blockchain developers that are now, especially in the last 6, 12, 18 months, needing to transition to post quantum security. But obviously, everyone in blockchain, they're not experts in post quantum security, and they also probably have a lot of misunderstandings. So I think, how do you think, is there any areas? I know there's a couple questions within one here, but are there a couple areas where you'd like to personally see some more, I don't know, morphing or cross pollination? And I think there's a couple other follow up questions I'll have to this one, but maybe we'll start with that. Where do you think that collaboration needs to be more, or what could it benefit from?
For years, I've been almost yelling into the void that cryptocurrencies and blockchain peoples need to be more aware of the quantum threat.
Mhm.
And you hit it on the nail. You said, look, the past 18 months, it really has been somewhere along those lines, past 18 months, where people have been paying more and more attention. People are now paying attention. People in the in the cryptocurrency sphere are paying attention. Uh, 2 years, 3 years. I can't recall exactly the dates, but not that far back. Um, People like me would bring up quantum threats, and we'd find a problem where quantum theorists, people that are trained in quantum computing and quantum information, um, a lot of them are not thinking about applications. They're thinking about the theory or the experiment. They're thinking about pushing forward the envelope. They're
Yep.
not really thinking of what sort of technical or societal impact that's
Yeah.
going to
In the
have.
wild.
That
Yep.
in the wild, that's not their area of expertise, and fair enough.
Hmm.
Um, and then people in I was going to say people in blockchains, but forget people in blockchains. People in cybersecurity have, have been not very concerned with quantum computers for a long time. I've actually heard cybersecurity experts. I'm not talking about your layman, your mom and pop, your grandparents. I'm talking about
Someone with
respected
deep
researchers
expertise.
with
Yeah.
PhDs in cybersecurity say things like, "Oh, well, I don't really care about quantum computers because they've been 20 years in the future since I can remember, and it's been longer than 20 years, and they're always 20 years in the future." And I think we touched on that a little bit before. That's not a completely wrong-headed um, thing to say, because some people in my field have oversold my field, unfortunately. Um, uh, there's uh, there's been startups for the past 15 years saying, "Oh yeah, we're going to build a startup and we're going to have a quantum computer in 5 years," and then the startup fails because they can't build a quantum computer in 5 years. They couldn't 15 years ago. So there has been a lot of that, and we wouldn't be the first technology that was overhyped. But another good example, just to steal one, uh, when I was starting my PhD, AI was considered overhyped. Very
Yep.
few
I
people
was I
cared
was just
about
going to use
AI,
this analogy. Yeah.
and yes, we thought that breaking the Turing test, defeating so for those in your audience who don't know what the Turing test is, the Turing test is you engage in dialogue, text dialogue across the screen, so you don't know who you're talking to. You engage in dialogue with something or someone, and at the end of the day, you have to decide whether you were talking to a human person
Human or computer.
or to a device. That's the Turing test. And 5 years ago, we thought that beating the Turing test might be 20 years off, and then all of a sudden,
Yeah.
the Turing test is irrelevant, right? Not only can a computer engage in conversations with people in a way that sounds and feels human, human beings have gone way past that, right? It's not even worth discussing. The Turing test became irrelevant almost overnight, right?
Yeah.
That
Yes.
point, we were never at the point
Yeah.
of AI defeating the Turing test. We were not there, and then we are years, like years past in a second. And this is how technology works, right?
Yeah.
And when you're in the business of building online systems where the selling point of that online system is that it's always online, that it's secure, that it's available 24/7, that it is immutable, right? Nobody can come in and steal it or alter it. And it's entirely based on cryptographic systems, then you should make it your business to care about threats to those cybersecurity systems, so those cryptographic systems. And for many years, people weren't doing that. And now I think people have started. And my hope is that moving forward, more and more people will be aware of that. We recently, with Joseph, put up a paper, and I think that was the, if I recall correctly, that was the one of the topics that we discussed last we
Yep.
met
Yep.
was fixing Bitcoin in particular. It's fixable, but the medicine could be worse than the disease in this case. It's not going to be an easy cure, and the more we delay, the harder it'll be. And obviously, an important point, and I think we touched this also last time we chatted, is that it's a lot cheaper to, it's a lot easier to build a blockchain with quantum resistance from the get-go than to try to retrofit quantum safety into an already in the wild working blockchain. And
It's
so
easier to do that than jump out with a backpack that doesn't have a parachute and then trying to find the parachute on the way down. I just want to add
yeah.
to Carlos, to your you brought up some really good points there in terms of from cybersecurity experts saying, hey, it's been 20 years out for 20 years. I think another main, this just probably ties to general human thinking in general, whether someone is a absolute noob or if they're a foremost expert, and anyone in between there. I think a common pattern is when anyone's looking at evolving technology, we tend to think of things progressing in a linear fashion. And I think that when it comes to technology, whether AI, as you named, or quantum progress, as we've seen, it needs to be looked at more so, not necessarily in an exact exponential, but much more so to that than linear. Because as you zoom out and look at the progress each year, especially you've been in the field of quantum computing for decades, you've seen the progression of it going, probably looking a little more like a linear chart, and then slowly but surely making its way up. And I know I'm painting a little bit of a broad stroke just to set a visual for people, but I think that's just really important for people to, when they're thinking about where things are headed next, it's important to think that way. And I don't say that in an alarmist way. This is more just to remove that limitation in people's general thinking overall.
So in psychology, they would call this a cognitive recency bias, right? And Carlos, you brought that up, that was true with AI until AI large language models, until when the Turing test was strictly mostly theoretical, and then suddenly overnight, essentially, it was not. I can also attest to the corporate CISO or CISO, depending on how you say it, and network design teams, having worked under multiple contracts for Fortune 500 companies, designing computers and systems, and working with the security teams. If you were to bring up these topics today, probably maybe just 4 years ago, you could potentially be looking at contract suicide. And that was just a few years ago. And I was asked, I wasn't, while I was on contract doing those, I wasn't promoting or bringing up these risks. I was simply asking engineers that I have and still do have lots of respect for. But it wasn't. Is this a threat? It was more of, what is a quantum computer?
Yeah.
That's how far much it's gone from what I don't even know what that is, to now people are discussing in probably 4 years or just 5 years. My thoughts.
Yeah, no, just to add to that, I've had conversations today with researchers, not in my field, but in other fields. I just had a conversation with someone in linguistics, and he said, no, I tried an LLM for translation, and it was terrible. It's never going to replace us. And I'm like, what are you talking about? You tried what, ChatGPT 4,
The
and
free
now
version,
you're,
yeah.
yeah, and now you're trying, but even if it was a paid version, there there's a reason why um, these LLM the models, they're called checkpoints, right? They're not no model is its final version. They're continue to evolve, and people just look at this one data point, like you mentioned. Um, if your readers have any mathematical background, what I tend to tell to my students is, don't look at the value of the function at time t. Look at its derivative. Or for the hockey players among you, Wayne Gretzky used to say, "I don't look at the where the puck is. I focus on where the puck is going to." Right.
Yep.
And I think a lot of people, even people in technology, which is the most frustrating, even in people in technology, will base their opinions on where the puck is, and they will look at the puck as if it were a still frame, and just consider the still frame. Right.
Mhm.
You need to take at least a 5-second clip, rewind it, and then fast forward it, see 5 seconds each way, so that you see not just where it is, but where it's moving, how fast it's moving.
To,
Is it
to be,
accelerating or decelerating? All of these factors are important in order to assess risk that comes from technological developments. And again, as humans, we tend to be very bad in general at assessing risk. I still know people that will not wear a helmet when riding a
Bicycle.
bike, and are more afraid of flying than getting into a car. In general, we're bad at assessing
Yeah, you
risk.
look at the safety risk. The risk of being in a car is, order of magnitude, couple or more so than flying a plane. But no, it brings up a point just in general in technology. It's like, if you look back at, even earlier versions of the internet, people are like, okay, I don't know, you take a food menu and you post that exact photo and you put it on the internet, and then it's people's idea of LLMs. Oh, it's, well, just this chat feature here, it hallucinates, but they're not looking at where the technology is heading. It's in its infancy still.
I think there's a capitalism tie in there as well too, because really the core focus of most organizations is to, okay, first off, we have to maintain what we have operationally, and that's just fixing things that are continually breaking, that we know about. And I think it's a deviation from human behavior to essentially what you're talking about, Carlos, is predict the future, right? By looking at the past and trying to extrapolate what those data points are, and then connect the dots in a meaningful way. And to be fair, that takes a high degree of intelligence and intuition to be able to do that. When most but in most like IT organizations, let's keep things running. All right, and let's lean on our vendors for what their version of the future looks like, and they may only have one or two preferred vendors that they do business with, so that doesn't give you a large sampling set, and it's too much work to do internally. So as far as, well, this is more of a classical interpretation, if you will, of how the corporate world functions. But that's been my experience.
It's been my experience as well.
Yeah, I wanna ask. We got a couple more questions on the docket. I know we've been going for a bit, but I'm really enjoying this. I think this is a great question for you, as you're in the trenches, doing research works, in academia. You're working with a lot of really smart, intelligent students that are, on the front-facing side of what is coming next. A good question I have for you, which maybe a few of the viewers that are watching this, maybe they are, a student, or they're, a developer, researcher, someone that maybe has an inkling to move towards that based on their previous history. What advice would you give to students watching this, or developers or researchers that want to work at these intersections, which are quantum, post-quantum, software engineering tied to that? Like, what would you say to them, to give them some confidence to maybe, follow their passion in that, and maybe just give your take on that? I think that would be great, because you really sit in a lane that can speak to them.
Let me unpack that, because I would
Yeah,
give
please.
different advice to different people. If I'm talking to a high school student, and the high school student wants to go into quantum computing, I'd say study a degree in physics, and then go do a graduate degree in quantum computing. The reason I say this is there's two undergraduates you can take for that will lead you naturally into a path for quantum computing. One of
Mhm.
them is physics, one of them is computer science. I foresee that sometime in the future there will be degrees in quantum technologies. Just like about 70, 80 years ago, there were no degrees in computer science. You went and did a degree in electrical engineering, or some mathematics, possibly. And eventually that would lead you into a path of doing computer science. Nowadays, there's degrees of computer science everywhere. I foresee someday that we'll have degrees in that. But in the meantime, you have to choose between computer science and physics, and both degrees are going to have a large number of subjects of courses that are not relevant to what you need to do. For example, in computer science, you don't really need to know all that much, say, object-oriented programming. It's an example to do quantum computing. It's not a bad idea to know about that, but it's not particularly useful to what you intend to do. In the same way, in physics, there will be things you don't really need to know cosmology or general relativity. It's useful to know, but it's not especially particularly relevant
And the
to
overall foundations, though, will help give them the confidence to know, because everybody
exactly.
hits a point in learning where you understand things, and then there hits a point where you're like, oh man, I don't understand it right now. So no, keep going, Carlos.
So sorry, yeah. So are you saying it's how you would suggest that students would get a
Physics.
foundational approach of something more Newtonian, more deterministic first, rather than the jump into something
He started
probabilistic?
out with, if he's depending on who the demographic of who he's talking to. So
Oh,
if it's
okay.
starting with,
There.
say, a high schooler, keep going, Carlos. I just interjected with a little side note, but please continue.
No worries. Yeah, so for a high school student, if they want to go into quantum technologies, quantum computing, I'd say it's either computer science or physics, and I would inch towards physics, because I think the overlap between what would be useful to you long term and what you actually learn in your undergraduate degree is higher,
Mhm.
a bit higher. Now, if you already have a degree and you're thinking of trying to jump in, again, it depends on who you are. If you're a professional, you don't have time to maybe take night courses at a university. You just want to read up as quickly as possible. There's some very good blogs out there, and there's podcasts like this one, which is what I recommend. Try to listen to people. I don't want to pat myself in the back, but try to listen to experts. So not necessarily this podcast.
There's
There's
all sorts of things they can listen to, whether it's
yeah.
Scott Aronson's talk,
I was
obviously.
gonna say Scott Aronson. Scott Aronson does very good talks.
Mosca has a number of ones. He had a recent one last year, but just to name a few, there's a number of them. Yeah,
Yeah, no, and I can vouch for both these people
yeah.
directly. If your audience doesn't know them, Scott Aronson is now a director of a research center in New Mexico. Forget.
Is it?
He
Yeah.
was at MIT for a while, and before that, he was at University of Waterloo. And last time I heard, he took up a fancy position at a university, I believe, in New Mexico. Um, Mike Mosca is also obviously former professor of and quantum computing at the University of Waterloo. I actually did my PhD under his supervision, and he's been doing lots of very interesting things. both of these people are credentialed experts in the field. You will see, unfortunately, a lot of stuff on the internet. If you just go to YouTube or just Google, there will be a lot more information out there that you can possibly absorb on quantum computing, and the quality will vary. And if you are at all um, interested in this area and want to put in the effort, I think it's better to go with an expert who will sometimes speak over your head. Uh, it's the downside of being an expert. Someone like Scott Aronson or Mike Mosca will once in a while maybe say something that will go over your head, rather than going to a professional YouTuber that's trying to explain it. They'll be
Yep.
better at explaining things, but they might not. They'll often get the math
And
wrong.
the beauty of this too, and I'll speak to someone that does not come from the technical background as they do. I've went down the rabbit holes of, say, listening to them over the years. And if you hit a point where they say something where you're like, whoa, I hadn't heard of that before. The beauty of online is if you're listening on Spotify or on YouTube, you can pause, you can, go to your favorite search engine or LLMs, as we just touched on recently, look up, go down a little rabbit hole on what that is. If they talk about something, what's the difference again between trapped ion and what are they doing with this with superconducting? You can research that, come back to it, and then you're cutting the learning curve there. So please continue. I'm just trying to give the viewer the example of, even if you're deep into blockchain, you're not going to be an expert in quantum, post quantum, and where that's going. So please, I like that advice.
The best analogy I can think of on your YouTube example would be accidentally ending up into the metaphysics consciousness collapsing wave function space. I think that's the best one I can think of, which is you can easily end up there.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely.
If you're not really focused.
No, absolutely, no, and it's one of the downsides of my field. Don't get me wrong, I love my field. I love what I do for a living, but one of the funny downsides is you get a lot of quacks. The whole quantum
I was
consciousness,
there.
Deepak
Yep.
Chopra, and there's a lot of misinformation, but there's also a lot of misinformation that doesn't come.
It's not grounded in the same. Yeah,
It's not as bad as that. It's just misunderstanding from people who mean
Misinformation
well,
versus
have
disinformation.
even maybe a technical background, but because quantum computing is based on quantum physics, and quantum physics is very counterintuitive. A very, very quick example. I'll try to give you the short version of this story. Schrodinger's cat. Schrodinger's cat is a quantum phenomenon that I've seen and heard explained 100,000 times. A very common explanation that you'll see on YouTube, on TV, from well-meaning
people,
science divulgers, people who are trying to inform and educate the people. A common explanation I'll hear is the cat is in the box, and it's either dead or alive, and it's not until you open the box that you know whether it's dead or alive. And that explanation is absolutely wrong, right? The way they're explaining it is if it were some statistical ensemble. The reason they're trying to explain the cat away as some sort of ignorance. It's ignorance on the user. And the proper way to understand Schrodinger's cat is that it has nothing to do with the ignorance of the user. The cat itself is in a state, and you really shouldn't say that it's both dead and alive. It's more correct to say that it is neither dead nor alive. When you open the box, you're performing a measurement on the cat, and you're collapsing that state. You're altering the state of the cat. Now it's dead or alive. But before you open the box, it wasn't one or the other. And that subtle difference is something that any expert in quantum computing will understand and will be able to draw it for you using diagrams or do the math and show you exactly what they mean. I just did that for my undergraduate students on Monday. This is what I was lecturing on. I was lecturing on Schrodinger's cat. The difference between saying I have a cat that is either dead or alive, and I have a superposition of a live and dead cat. It's subtle, but it makes all the difference. Without that difference, you have no quantum computers. Without that difference, you don't have any quantum crypto. Nothing in the quantum physics world works without that subtle difference. If it weren't for that subtle difference, quantum computers would be just classical devices that run slightly
At the
faster
end of
for
the day,
certain
the cat's
problems.
too macroscopic, right? It's already entangled with its environment, and it is in
Yeah.
it is in one state, right? If it were much smaller, perhaps that could be possible. I think we ran across an article where they put a tardigrade into superposition for a very short amount of time a while ago. I don't know if that was credible or not. Found it interesting though.
I mean,
don't know
tardigrades
about
are
the
fascinating as
tardigrade.
is. Yeah.
I don't know about the tardigrade. I honestly don't know, but what has been confirmed, and this isn't new, buckyballs, putting buckyballs into superposition has always
Oh
been
yeah.
a fun one. And I mean, this is an old experiment too. This is not new.
The-
But yeah, we're building bigger and bigger Schrodinger cats, and so we know for a fact that we can build these superpositions, and we also know that they're not statistical ensembles. It's not a system where you have a certain level of degree of ignorance. It's something else entirely, and it's
if we
something
have
else entirely that we don't understand. Human
if,
beings do not have the intuition to understanding. The only thing we can do, rather than understanding it, is visualizing it or accepting it mathematically.
mathematically, exactly. I still see different interpretations by people I respect on YouTube on how exactly the time delayed quantum eraser works. So a lot of confusion out there. It's easy to get misdirected.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think probably maybe one or two more questions would be good to get through. I'm really
Let's make them good.
we covered some really good ground. Michael, is there any on the docket that you definitely want to get to? I know there's a couple here. I think maybe one would be on just you
Well,
know
how about this?
yeah
I got one, Ryan.
yeah.
Uh, uh, One of them is what would you say is the most common misconception about the quantum threat to cryptography that you still encounter, and what would you like the blockchain community to understand more clearly, assuming that that question makes sense?
So, two answers to that one. In terms of just answering your question literally, misconception um, brings us back to timing. I still hear pushback from people in cybersecurity saying, yeah, quantum computers are 20 years off and they'll continue to be 20 years off until I'm dead.
To which you respond, Moscow's theorem, or what?
Uh, my response would be just look at the data for yourself. I mean, yes, you can listen to the experts. Mike Mosca and Marco Piani put out a report every year where they reassess where
Yeah,
we are.
the last one was pretty interesting. When I don't remember the exact date on when they came out with it, but it's definitely interesting to look back on the ones from prior years.
Yeah, no, and every year they put out a new report with the newest data, and they reassess where we are, how fast we're moving, where we're moving to. That they'll look at the different technologies and how each one of them is moving, and I would say yes, look at their data again. Mike Mosca and Marco Piani are experts in their field, and they're well respected experts who speak to other experts. They're not just coming up with these numbers
Yeah.
themselves. But if you don't want to look, if you don't want to trust the experts, uh, you can just go look at the data yourself. And IBM publishes the size of their latest quantum computers. You don't have to trust them either. There's lots of people around the world that pay IBM for access to those quantum computers, and we wouldn't be paying them to access for those quantum computers if their specs weren't real. So again, if you are absolutely critical and paranoid and you don't want to trust anybody's word, you can still arrive to the same conclusion that the experts are arriving because the data is public. There's no conspiracies. All of you nowadays, you don't even have the excuse of saying, oh yeah, scientific journals are behind paywalls, so I can't access the same information that scientists can. No, that's not even true. All of my research, for example, is either published in a journal that has gold open access,
Yep.
and or at the same time publicly available on public sites like the archive. And this is true for most of research in the area. So the data is out there. You can do the numbers for yourself.
Let me ask you. I can wrap up with a question on this one, Ryan. So let me ask you this, and this is something that I've talked about quite a bit on the YouTube channel. Is there's an aspect of me that agrees with you in that the data is out there, and that it's more accessible than it has been ever. The devil's advocate in me then also, okay, what is it the things that we don't know? And I'll give an example. One of the things that I've said repeatedly in these are my opinions. I may not reflect anyone else's or even of the team, but there is no, in my view of this scenario, there is no incentive. In fact, there would be strong disincentives for any nation state that was actually making progress on a cryptographically relevant quantum computer to actually publish or make public the capabilities of that machine. And I relate this to essentially an iceberg effect, whereas the tip of the ice, what you see on top of the water, might actually be what you're reading academically. What worries me is what's underneath the water that you cannot see, that there is no information about, and the incentive structure along with it to not have that information be public. And therefore, in my mind, through what feels like a logical deduction, is that there's a good chance that anyone that's talking about the actual state of quantum computers online might actually be committing treason as far as revealing proprietary state knowledge. Now, I'm embellishing a little bit there for, little comedic effect, but that abstractly, that is my thought. I would love to get your take.
Yeah, maybe Strike, is that maybe just even a third pillar, like as Carlos alluded to? It's like you're like, hey, you can either listen to the foremost experts. If you don't want to do that, you can look at all the publicly available data, and then in complement to that, hey, maybe there's a lot of information that we don't know.
I'm seeing this as academic.
I don't know. Let's see what Carlos thinks on this. This
is public, and that publishes everything that we don't know. What I'm talking about is a holistic, more worldview approach, and that these incentives align to keep what actually exists completely not public. And I'd love to get Carlos's take on that.
No, so I agree wholeheartedly. You won't be surprised to hear that. But let me give you two data points that will actually make you even more worried than you.
I'm already worried.
Audience, lean forward.
I'm already worried.
So one thing I always I don't just teach quantum computing. I also teach a introduction to cybersecurity course for my undergraduate students. And one thing I tell them is about SHA-1. And when I tell them the secure hash algorithm, and it's a technical module, so course. So I tell them all about the mathematical details of SHA-1.
I know where you're going.
But I also love to tell them a little bit about the history and tell them why it's called SHA-1 rather than SHA. The reason it's called SHA-1 is because, as the for those in your audience that don't know the history, SHA is NIST and National Institute of Standards and Technology standard. It's an international standard published by NIST in the US. It had collaborations with lots of people in academia. Lots of people around the world gave their input to create SHA. And the standard was actually approved. I was going to say it was about to be approved. No, it was actually approved. And then the NSA butted in and said, you know what? You need to make this change to the standard. And the people at NIST asked why. And the NSA said, we can't tell you, but make this change to the standard anyways. NIST being NIST said, okay. And they did the change, and the change was published as SHA-1. Because SHA already existed, They had to introduce a new standard. SHA was never adopted. SHA-1 was adopted. 10 years, around 10 years after SHA-1 was introduced, researchers, I forget which university, so I don't want to say it out loud right now, but researchers at a public university published a paper where they found a vulnerability that applied to the original SHA, but not to SHA-1. It was fixed by the NSA's proposed change.
Yes,
This is
so
not
I'm
the only
aware of
case.
this historical analog. Yep,
This is
agreed.
not the only case, but this is one of the most famous ones, which has led a lot of people in my community in the cybersecurity. So, I put on two hats. When I say my community, I can mean either quantum information or cybersecurity.
Yep.
In this case, I mean cybersecurity. It has led a lot of people in the cybersecurity community to guesstimate that the NSA is about 10 years ahead of us in cryptography knowledge. Just cryptography. Forget technology. This is just maths, right? They just the mathematics. They know more maths than the rest of us by about 10 years. I mean, a little bit, I don't want to be too defensive, but in our defense, in the public university's defense, we publish our research. So they get to read what we do. We don't get to read what they do.
It's a one-way street.
It's a one-way street. So
One-way function.
Yeah. So it's a bit unfair, but it's an important data point to be aware of. And that's just the NSA. There's other security services around the world. Of course, here in Britain, we have the NCSC, which is part of GCHQ. China has their army of mathematicians and other countries around the world. Could this be happening also technologically? I don't see why not. Another point to add a little bit of concern to you and your audience is before blockchains, before Bitcoin, what would have been the incentive for a nation state or a corporation or anybody to develop a quantum computer and not tell anybody else? Well, we're already moving to post-quantum crypto. So if everybody moves to post-quantum crypto, it's essentially you can factor large numbers faster. But now you have Bitcoin out there, which is worth how much again?
Give or take, ebb and
1.5
flows the
trillion.
markets. We're talking trillions overall across the whole market. So, yep.
Exactly. So you have trillions of reasons why some actor, be it a nation state or just a very wealthy private entity, would want to develop a quantum computer and not tell the rest of the world about it. Right? All
And
of a
that's just
sudden,
Bitcoin.
there's incentive infrastructure there for that, exactly the type of behavior that you're worried about. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I didn't mean to interrupt you. You were giving a good point being, and that's just Bitcoin. So that's at 1.5 trillion or whatever it is. That's not the entire cryptographic market cap. What I would add on top of that is suggest that information itself, secrets, classified information that's transmitted today, everything as far as I know is transmitted classically. I think I can say that with pretty high confidence. Would be arguably an order of magnitude higher in value, because now we're secrets themselves, intelligence probably is invaluable. So that would be an even stronger incentive, in my mind, to keep the actual progress as secret. So back to the original question, what is your, if you can, and it's a hard question, what is your confidence or risk assessment of essentially the iceberg that we cannot see, the part that we don't know what we don't know?
I would suggest that the things that we don't know, that the other part of the iceberg, it's non-zero and it's non-negative, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Meaning, if things are already bad, and one of my recent papers with my students that we discussed earlier is basically trying to raise the alarms, light the fires, have Gondor call for aid. that things are already bad in Bitcoin in particular, but obviously it's not the only quantum vulnerable blockchain out there. Things are bad based just on what we know, based on what we know we know. Once we start adding things we don't know and things that we don't know, things only get worse, right? There's no version of this story where we discover things that we don't know and it turns out to work in favor of the people that are not concerned, right? There's no version of the story where it turns out that um, that China had a secret lab where they proved that quantum computers are impossible to build past a certain size, right? That's there's not going to be some saving piece of information that's going to make all of our concerns go away. If anything, is going to make our concerns worse. As a scientist, I'm very afraid to quantify what I don't know. As in, if you're asking me, okay, how bad is the part that we don't know? Well, by definition, we don't know.
And I think
and I don't really want to take a guess. But what we
Yeah.
do know is that it's extremely unlikely to be zero or negative. It's going to push us more into the red, and we're already in the red technologically. I've been arguing that Bitcoin in particular, any non-quantum resistant blockchain, has to start looking into quantum resistance as of yesterday.
So if we're already in the red, then we can both agree, with both approaching this scientifically, that what we do not know only adds to the risk exposure.
Exactly.
And that it's non-zero. And that it's non-zero.
Yes, yes. It adds to the risk. I mean,
we can agree to that.
Is it technically possible that somebody out there has a proof that quantum computers will not scale past a certain size? Yes. I mean, I'm as likely to walk outside and be hit by a meteorite, but I do want to put that disclaimer out there because I don't want people to come back and
I use the flying manhole cover analogy.
And I'll add to that, as Carlos mentioned to us and elaborated on earlier. People that are deciding for their own, risk profile or whatever you want to call it, look at what the foremost experts are saying. Do your research. You can look at all the public available data. You can see what they're saying publicly, and then if you want, based on what you think might not be said, I don't know, do you double amplify that, or maybe just 50%? That's up to the
add a value of whatever you think equals. You don't know what you don't know, and that's where you then personally accept that, and that's a decision each person or scientist or blockchain or Bitcoiner has to do themselves.
Yeah, no. As a closing out of that, I think first off, Carlos, Michael, and I, really enjoyed this conversation. Obviously, taking time out of your your busy schedule between research, lecturing, all the other work that you're doing to sit down with us and have a kind of a nice full ranging conversation. So first off, thank you for that from us and, on behalf of our audience. I think as a closeout, hopefully, upcoming, maybe we'll have another conversation around, even continued work that you're doing at a university. For viewers, we're going to drop in the show notes some links to, Carlos, the previous paper, Downtime Required for Bitcoin Quantum Safety, for easy reference. We'll put a link to the Quantum Applications Research Center, where Carlos is the deputy director. Carlos, any other last closing thoughts to give our audience with, whether it's pointing them to a URL or two, or any last thoughts?
No, just I wanted to thank both of you. I see this as part of my job. Part of being a scientist is being a researcher and a lecturer teacher is divulging what we know. And it's not if I do the research and then it's just me and my students that know about it, it's useless. And obviously, because of the nature of the research that I do, to me, it's really important that people out there know it. So I want to turn it around and say thank you very much for the work the two of you are doing, because this, I truly do believe. I will drink. What's the? I don't know what the phrase is.
Drink the Kool-Aid.
I put my wallet where my mouth is. I think that would be it.
Your energy.
Yes.
Yeah.
That.
Maybe your energy where your mouth is. Yeah. Same. I've done the
Yes.
same.
So I truly believe in this. I believe in this in this project, in this program of trying to
Thank you.
inform the public of the necessity of a quantum safe world, and in this case, it's quantum safe blockchains and cryptocurrencies. But more generally, I want to live in a quantum, not just quantum safe. I want to live in a technologically safe world, and
Yeah.
even more generally, I want to live in a safe world. It
Yep.
just happens that I happen to be an expert in a particular area of security, and so that's why we're here. But I think we all want to live in a world where we have less things, not more things, to stress about. And so thank you for your work in spreading the good word.
No, I appreciate it all around. For those viewing, as just mentioned, going to have a number of links to what we just discussed with Carlos. And as always, for those viewing, until the next episode, keep those digital assets post-quantum secure. And we hope you enjoyed this great conversation with Carlos. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.